Hey everyone, today's conversation is really, really interesting because I get to talk to someone who is impacting not just the life sciences, but a bunch of different industries, primarily in an area that I think a lot of us actually care about, which is how does this all impact the environment? How does this all impact the earth, if you will? So to that, we got the original mountain man to be with us. So if you care about the life sciences, if you care about health, if you care about waste, you care about the earth, all of it, you care about today's conversation. Our guest today is really special. He is the strategic business manager for Triumvirate Environmental Inc. And we're going to talk to him a little bit about what that means, why we should care, and kind of go from there. This is the Darshan Talks live stream. Our guest for today is Greg Rosinski. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. Just to be clear, I'm an attorney. I'm a pharmacist. I advise companies with FDA-regulated products, but I'm not your attorney. I'm not your pharmacist. And Greg is not here advising you in specific. Just to be clear, the advice given right now is neither legal advice nor clinical advice, and they don't necessarily reflect the opinions of the host, the guest, our companies, our clients. If you like what you hear, please leave a comment. Please subscribe. Please share. You can also reach out to our guest. And Greg can be reached at grosinski@triumvirate.com, and I'll be flashing that across the screen. Or you can actually call him, for those people who are listening to this on audio, at 401-300-1152. And we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment, please share, please subscribe, and feel free to ask our guests questions. You can find me on Twitter at DarshanTalks, or just go to our website, DarshanTalks.com. And that was a mouthful. Hey, Greg, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on. So first of all, let's start with the beginning. Speaking to just the fact that you are in environmental work, where were you recently? That speaks to how much of an environmentalist you are. Because I love the part of the story. That's how I met you. That's where you were when I spoke to you.
So I think when you and I first were talking, I literally was in the mountains. Since then, I'm just coming back from San Francisco, downtown Biopharma USA, right? So fun contrast between Cambridge and San Francisco is they're both competing pretty heavily for the pharma world. So I'm just coming back from the San Francisco side.
So talk to me a little bit about this. So you're saying that both San Francisco and Cambridge are competing. How is Philly doing in that, by the way?
Philly is picking up the pace quite a bit. I mean, anybody that's around the Philly area, if you don't know Market Street, you're probably not in the pharmaceutical industry, right? I think Market Street's kind of making the East and West Coast realize, hey, we have something special here as well.
Very, very cool. So what you mentioned there are three major city hubs. But when you get involved, you're obviously talking about the impact on the environment in general. So talk to me a little bit about what Triumvirate does and how it impacts the life sciences.
Yeah. So if you think of a life science company, and then, similar to what we discussed before, you look at the current labor market, which is just a disaster, right? I mean, it's not what it was pre-COVID, where we had a lot of people looking for jobs. There's a labor shortage. So whether you're a small life science startup company, 2 people to 5 people, strictly venture capital based inside of an incubator, all the way up to, big pharma, right? 10,000 people plus, everybody has a specific need. So it then becomes sort of a tug and a pull between how long do I want to tug to find that right resource? That's probably a diamond in the rough, versus do I go to a company like Triumvirate that is turnkey and physically does everything EHS and see if they can, if we can help you out. And that's what we're experiencing, all over North America.
So, but what is EHS? Like, what are the areas you get pulled into? Because I think when you and I spoke before this call, you said 22 different areas. Is that right?
Yep. So I'd say 22, give or take. So environmental health and safety. So if you think of, and we'll stick with the pharma industry, right? Mm-hmm. If you think of a pharmaceutical company, they're going to have regulations, they're going to have permits, they're going to have plans, they're going to have licenses that they have to make sure are in place just to be compliant and just to actually start the business, right? Then they're also going to have to take care of all of those aspects, keep them up to date. They're going to have to train their employees, and that is just the programs of EHS, right? Environmental health and safety. Then there also is going to be the chemical waste, the biological waste, radioactive waste, controlled substances, municipal solid trash. There's all of those aspects. Then, depending on the size of the organization, they could have above ground storage tanks. They could have biosafety cabinets and vivariums and everything in between that needs to be deconed, cleaned, and then recertified. If you think of the nuts and bolts of a building, a lot of cities have wastewater permits. We also get involved in actually setting up and designing a wastewater system. The bulk, if you're in a city and for some reason you're doing a technology that can't be discharged, we then also have the bulk tanker side of the business that handles that as well. So physically anything from, the facility all the way to the programs, just everything that's encompassing a pharmaceutical company.
So let's start from the beginning. So let's say I'm a new entrepreneur. I have this brilliant idea. I'm gonna fix cancer, for argument's sake, right? That's what he or she's gonna do right now. Are these people even thinking about EHS at this moment? Or are they going, we're gonna have to be further on before something like that becomes necessary?
Split right down the middle. Half of them, it's not even a concern, and they just want to figure out, if oncology is what we're going after, how do we solve cancer? Right. Not how do we make sure we're compliant with all the regulations that we're required to follow, right? Versus, so there's some that, there's a lot of big pharma people that have been in big pharma for years, and they just reach sort of a stage in their career where they say, you know what, I'm going to go into this sort of incubator mode, this startup, because there's a lot of excitement, right? It's high risk, high reward. That's the other side of the spectrum, where those people typically are the ones reaching out to us because they already have experience working for big pharma. They've been trained. They understand, hey, before we get rocking and rolling with this amazing research, we need to be compliant. Darshan, you obviously have a lot of knowledge with the FDA. We get pulled into that aspect a lot. And usually, those newer companies, when you have somebody that's used to that background, they're typically the ones reaching out to us.
So the ones who are smart is what you're saying about everyone's smart. Let's take that off the table. But smart about the risks that they're facing are the ones who are reaching out to you. The ones who are ambitious are going, let's keep moving forward and then deal with the repercussions if necessary, because I don't know what I don't know right now. So now let's say they come to you and they have this idea of, look, we're doing oncology. Talk to me about how you start guiding them. How do you start discovering what their needs are?
Yeah. So it's sort of like going to a doctor, right? We're doing a lot of poking and prodding. We're trying to figure out what their research is, what their involvement's going to be. Are they going to be a digital company? Are they going to be a hands-on company? What is their infrastructure? What type of building are they in? Are they in a building? Again, we brought up Market Street. There's some incubators that are amazing, right? Those incubators, you physically are plug and play. They want those new companies that have these researchers that just, the passion is to solve cancer. Those incubators are set up so that those same researchers don't have to worry about this aspect, right? It's very plug and play. As we start going through that sort of maturation, we're asking these questions, right? What type of facility are you in? Are you going into a facility that already provides that? If you are, what does that look like and what type of questions are you asking? Because at the end of the day, that company's still going to own, they're going to own the legal aspect. They have to make sure that they're doing what's required. But again, it's just asking, we ask a lot about what does it look like as far as a year out, 2 years out, 5 years out. I think we're all used to a lot of the unicorns that have popped up in the biopharma industry. Doesn't happen all the time, but it's not uncommon. We're working with a company that has 10 or 15 people today, and then this time next year, they're at 300 to 500. That doesn't happen as much, but it happens enough where we also want to make sure expectations are in line. So if we need to be training 20 to 50 new employees per month, we got to have resources ready for that.
So what I hear you saying is you're planning with them. You're helping them plan a strategy the whole time. Do you find that they are pushing back? Because if you're a 10 to 15 person organization right now, to invest into where you might be next year, I imagine is a capital intensive problem. So how do you help them risk stratify, if you will?
Yep. We break down what they're going to need today as a less than, call it, 10-person employee,
Okay.
versus what they're going to need when they're over certain barriers. Because, depending on the size of their company, different agencies, whether it's EPA, OSHA, FDA, there'll be different requirements that they physically need. And then it also depends, are they doing benchtop research, or is this 10 people that have been already sort of individually researching this for 10 years and they're ready to go? So just different strategies. But as far as capital intensive, usually a lot of the C-suite's actually working with us because they're trying to build the culture that is then going to get noticed by big pharma. Because, the startup venture pharma, they're truly, in order to really make it, they're going to need to be approaching seed funding from big pharma. And the best way to do that is to come to the table, not only looking like you know what you're doing infrastructure wise, but fully coming to the table with everything put together. So usually C-suite's very supportive.
Very, very cool. So what I'm hearing you say is that you're getting these people thinking not just like a small startup, but you're building them to be that unicorn that they're getting ready to be, and looking ready for a buyout if that's what they're interested in, because they just look ready at that point. So now you're talking. Let's say they're in that lab stage, and now they're starting to mature a little bit, right? And you're going, okay, we really need to start thinking about what this actually means. How do you help them contemplate the permits and what's required? Like what you mentioned, OSHA, you mentioned FDA, you mentioned EPA. Do you find that companies are looking only at themselves, or in these early stages you're moving from, oh, you know what, you're the company, but a lot of the work will be done by your providers? So is the risk transfer, or do you actually help the providers as well so that the risk doesn't transfer over to the company?
I hope this answers it. So a good example is we're dealing with a contract manufacturing group out in the Midwest. And I won't say the area because it'd be pretty easy to find them. They also know that we're working with several other organizations that are in their same line of field. They will ask us what we've seen, lessons that we've learned, what the maturation of that other company that's maybe 2 years ahead of them has looked like. Again, what we can instruct them on what we've seen that'll be helpful, so that as they get to that sort of stage, how do they not repeat the errors, or how do they improve what was already improved on? So there is some sharing, and I don't know if that's answering your question, but there is a lot of sharing that goes along. We typically find most companies, right, don't want to talk about the ins and out of their company. But at the end of the day, when it comes to an environmental health and safety program, aside from some specific details in between companies, the concept's very similar. So we find a lot of synergy with companies actually wanting to know, how is the company over there doing it? And it tends to be a good communication.
Which is really interesting. So what you almost land up being, you are consultants, but you end up almost knowledge sharing in a confidential way, where you help companies understand what not just their competitors, but their next stage in their life cycle looks like, so that they're ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And a good example is, we think about the pharmaceutical company, and then sometimes what's forgotten is the support in that industry just for that company. So, you have patent lawyers, you have legal attorneys like yourself, then you have property owners, and you have property managers, and you've got facilities companies. We tend to find a lot of companies that, again, are on that smaller scale looking to move. Well, they may know one of the key real estate people that we're working with as well. So when they go to move out of a facility, they're trying to protect their liability as well, and then also have an understanding of what does it look like to move a biopharma company from one location to the next. We're able to connect the dots between real estate owners and those executives at that life science company so they can look at things from a different lens.
So you mentioned a really important part of this, which everyone, including myself for a second, forgot all about, which was this is not just about your company. This is about the people who are working with you, specifically, especially in the area you work in. You're thinking of the landlords who own the property that you're probably working on. Do you find yourself digging into the contracts to see what they're allowed to do versus what the landlord's going to do, or is that more something you leave to the lawyers?
No, we get so excuse me. So our engineering team, anytime we go to move a company out, there's environmental legal language that is in place right between the real estate and the pharma company that specifically calls out. It's no different than if your rental agreement, if you were to go leave an apartment, if you're renting, your landlord wants it to be in a certain state. Now, think of an organization that's very heavy in anything, right? Chemistry, or if it's a biosafety level 2 or 3, whatever it is, the pharma company wants to protect their liability. So they will ask us, what do we need to do to leave a closure report that protects our liability and proves we didn't leave anything for someone else, right? Way to contain liability. The real estate company then is asking the same question. Here is our requirements for company A. Can you please make sure that they're not leaving us something that we don't want? So there's that real intertwining between the two. And again, usually it's everybody's at the table. We've helped enough companies and enough real estate facilities where we pretty much know the legal language. We still always ask for it, but that comes up all the time.
So you find yourself negotiating and helping with that closure reports. What are some tips you'd give to companies that are looking to expand and move on to a different location up front? Like, obviously from a legal perspective, you're kind of going, make sure you have no liability, but realistically that's not possible. So what are the mistakes you've seen?
Just improper records. We're going to be in a location for 3 years. Potentially, if you've got chemistry, at some point, something is going to spill, right? We always say it's never going to happen. We hope it doesn't happen, but at some point it's going to happen, right? Document your errors, and some of them are accidents and just you can't get around them. Document them, right? So that way, when you go to leave that facility, you already have the historicals to prove, and it also helps us out from an engineering perspective. If we have to go do analytical, you're required to do a certain amount of samples per room. It helps us also say there was a known spill contaminant here. We have tested and found that it's no longer there. It supports the final document. So that'd be the biggest thing is one, good record keeping, right? I mean, I think, anything that's involved with the FDA speaks for itself, right? Record integrity too, right? Keep it detailed, keep it with dates. And I think that's how I would answer that.
So you think the biggest issue tends to be this lack of record keeping, which totally 100% makes sense. I guess my question is, as you start moving into sort of getting to that next phase, do you find yourself taking care of the permits? Like, how do you, like, are you guys involved in the actual permit making stage, and who do you tend to reach out to get that permitting done?
Yep. So this would tie to your last question too. Something we notice a lot of companies just don't have experience with is they'll come to us, they plan on moving to a new facility, say 30 days. They don't even take into consideration the fact that some of the permits and licenses where you have to call a local authority out to do an inspection, they may 2 to 3 to 4 months backed up. And in COVID, we saw it 4 or 5 months backed up. So then what ends up happening is we get a lot of fingers pointed at us saying, well, no, get it done in 30 days. And it's like, I'd love to, but you have to also think. So there's a planning aspect. If you're going to leave a facility, you also need to be asking good questions. And we get asked it a lot, is if we're moving to a new company in a new city, what should we be looking at time frame for when we should start the process? Because we have what we call a jump start. If you go to a new facility, we set up all permits, programs, licenses, but that takes time. And again, asking those questions in advance help us out a lot.
Very, very interesting. So the other thing you mentioned you do is you train employees. I've been doing a lot of this for a long time. Which employees are you training? Because I don't remember going through that training before. Is that because the clients I worked with, I was outside counsel, so it wasn't really necessary? Or is it because you're training specific types of employees? Like if I have to advise my clients in the future, I'm trying to think about who I should be thinking about and make sure you do this.
Yeah. So typically it's anyone that's working in an operational function. Okay. And what that basically means is if you're strictly in the office, we do trainings for office people relative to laboratory spaces and manufacturing spaces, but it's typically geared towards anyone that's going to be involved or walking around in the space, right? So if you're actively going to be an office person, but you're going to be giving tours in a manufacturing space, we have a separate training for those people so that when they walk into a controlled environment, they know what they're doing and what the requirements are and what the hazards are and what type of personal protective equipment they should be wearing. The typical trainings we're doing, though, are for true people working in manufacturing, research, higher ed, anything with an actual operational function. That's what our trainings are geared towards, right? So if you're a new employee and you're going to be a benchtop worker, there are a lot of hazards that a company is required to instruct their people of, right? It's OSHA awareness.
Yeah.
We take care of that for the companies. And that can be a couple different ways. It can be just like this, it can be one-on-one. We also have a learning management system, which is cloud-based. So that way, again, people's time is precious. They can log on to our site and it has those already built, canned trainings that they can take care of.
It's funny you mentioned learning management systems, because I just got this comment here from Ellen Budenko. I wonder if Viva Vault or similar platforms have EHS modules. What has been your experience with that?
Yep. So very familiar with Viva. When it comes to our EHS module, Ellen, great question. We have ours set up so it's SCORM compliant, and we'll leave the acronyms for another day. But, I'm based on the fact that you asked that question, I'm assuming you know what that is. But essentially, our system is SCORM compliant, which is a huge, huge deal. Most HR trainings that are LMS based need to be some form of SCORM compliant. And also, if you look at facilities that are heavily regulated with the FDA from like a document tracing and integrity, that's why we wanted ours to be SCORM compliant, so that if an FDA inspection comes in, they absolutely will ask about training records. Our program will feed directly into a facility's system to keep that integrity and record keeping. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. And actually, Ellen pointed out various limbs probably have different versions of everything. So your point's well made. I guess my question is, you work primarily, you work across all the industries. Do you find yourself helping hospitals, for example, just as much? Or they obviously have a lot of these because they're the ones operating, for example, with biological and hazardous waste.
Yep. So we have 4 niches. We were talking about biopharma, but higher ed, industrial, healthcare, and life science. So we split it up. We have people that kind of grow up in the industries. So everybody that's been raised in the higher ed industry, we tend to keep true to the niches, as we say, because they're just very different, right? If you're used to the healthcare industry and true hospitals, that is a very different run organization than somebody that's working in a biopharma. And it's not that you can't go from one industry to the other, but there's just some key things that you learn when you're in one specific. So we have an entire hospital niche as well.
Very, very cool. We can keep talking, but we are obviously well past time. I usually aim for these to be about 15, 20 minutes. We're at 25, but this was amazing. Thank you again for coming up. I have a few questions for you if you have time, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first question is, what's the best way for people to reach you?
I'd say email or cell phone, the two that were provided earlier, whatever is easiest, emails, phone calls, text, LinkedIn, whatever's helpful.
Excellent. Another question is, what's something you'd like to ask the audience?
What didn't I answer that I could answer? And if you want to reply back, I'd love to answer those questions.
Perfect. So feel free to reach out to Greg. Again, you can reach him at grosinski@triumvirate.com, or you can find him at his phone number at 401-300-1152. And last question, what's something most people don't know about you?
Absolutely love the mountains. If you haven't been to Montana, get to Montana and then get back to the city.
That sounds amazing. Greg, thank you so much for coming on. This was amazing. Thanks again.
Appreciate it. Have a great day. Thank you for your time, everybody.